We have with us today, as I said at the top of the program, Daniel Fiverson, who is an evolutionary astrologer. Yes, love it, love it, love it. Great insight with evolutionary astrology, and we'll definitely be diving into that. He's also studied the I Ching, Tarot, and had a great shift after reading Autobiography of a Yogi in the late 60s. That's when he began to make his change in his life and his path to move into what he is doing now. So let's give a nice warm welcome to Daniel Fiverson. Hi, Daniel. Welcome to the program.
Hi, Michelle. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, so glad you're on today. Any day would have been great, but this is, with the calls that we've had in and the questions that we've had, people asking. Let's dive in a little bit here. It seems like your first awakening was after, if it's true, Autobiography of a Yogi. Is that when you first kind of said, oh, there's more to life or more that I have to do? Or would you – go ahead.
Yeah, it was. I think it was the 60s in general, Michelle. I'm certainly a child of the 60s, and the experiences that we had back in those years definitely was a transitional time for me. It really took me out of my childhood, my conditioning from my parents, and everything that had come before, and made me realize that what they taught me in school wasn't really what it's all about.
Nice. So you were already waking up, and then these tools, which by the way, I'm a big student of the I Ching. It's just amazing. What did you start doing first? How did it happen? Because, I would like to give a background of the guests, because a lot of people that listen either are, newly awakening or in a path of awakening more and more, and then they get to the point of, gosh, I really don't want to do what I'm doing anymore in my life, or I want to study more this or that, or I want to go in a new direction. So I always find it interesting, what is our guest path? What brought them to where they are now, helping people and fully doing what they love doing?
Okay, I think it's been a long path. The 60s really was like machine gun exposure to all these things for me all at once. But it took me processing all this to actually be able to say that this is who I am. We don't change that easily. We have such a self-image that we hold on to, sometimes at all cost. So, I didn't just all of a sudden become a professional astrologer after I read my first astrology book. It took me a while to realize that, this is who I am. I had to do some other things in the meantime and realize that I wasn't all those things. I guess it's kind of like there's a Hindu proverb, neti neti, which means not this, not this. And I had to go through that process. I had to go through that process. In order to really begin to understand who it was who I am and what it was that I was supposed to be doing.
So was it this? It's interesting because evolutionary astrology, was it this evolution for you? Was it more and more, and then leading you there, leading you towards this path?
I think when I encountered Jeff Green's work, that's really what pulled the trigger for me. Because I've like I said, I have followed astrology. I have kind of studied it, but I never really felt that was who I was, because the astrology that I was working with, and this isn't to say anything bad about other astrology, because I believe all astrology works, but it was too formulaic. It was too formulaic for me. And when I encountered Jeff's work, it just resonated with me. Said, of course, this is what it's about. This is what we're supposed to be looking at. It's not about who am I going to marry? It's not about I meet a tall dark stranger. It's not fortune telling. It's about understanding from a soul level who we are, where we've come from, and where we've intended to go.
So share with us a bit of evolutionary astrology and the background of it and what it actually, and you've touched on it here, what it actually is the focus of evolutionary astrology.
Sure. Evolutionary astrology is a soul-based perspective, lifetime to lifetime, what we've brought with us. Traditional Western astrology uses sun, moon, and ascendant as the primary significators to determine, or I guess to say, as the gateway into the chart. From an evolutionary astrology perspective, Pluto and the lunar nodes are the gateway into understanding this lifetime, because Pluto and the south nodes show us our karmic necessities and our evolutionary intentions going forward.
That's interesting. Okay, I'm always drawn to the nodes.
I know that's a mouthful. Yes. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, no, I love it because and if you could explain it more, because I know in those people that are listening that have their charts, is it the south node past life or where we've been or what our default, what we naturally do, in the north node, in a way, what we're aspiring towards or going towards or integrating?
Yes.
You look at it that way.
Let me break it down. We start with Pluto because Pluto itself is the soul. Pluto is the wave that's separated from the ocean of all that is. And in that separation, the illusion of separation is created. We think we're just the wave. We forget that we're actually a wave that's part of the ocean. But the wave is only the ocean experiencing itself. So that's the first understanding. Pluto in the chart, by house, sign, and aspect to other planets, reveals the cycle of the lessons that we've been working on prior to this lifetime, and what are our primary soul lessons in this lifetime. We come in generationally, and that's the way that the planet itself evolves. Pluto, I have Pluto in Leo. It was in Leo for 17 years, so millions of people, everybody in my math class in 9th grade, we all came in on that same bus. But each of us has that Pluto placement in a different one of the 12 houses. And in a sense, that the house placement is actually more significant than the sign that Pluto is in. I'm not dismissing the sign, but we look at the house first. Someone with Pluto in the first house is an Aries soul. They have a lot of Aries energy. That Pluto is right out there. It's instinctive. Everybody knows about them. They can't hide their core personality. Somebody with Pluto in the 12th house is going to also have that powerful kind of personality, but it won't be as obvious. It's going to be hidden. It's behind the scenes. So, and they're a Pisces personality, Pisces soul, excuse me. So the placement of Pluto by house really gives us a starting point, a gateway into the soul, and we understand, where this soul is coming from and what the lessons are about. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah, it does. So, go ahead. To touch on, wherever Pluto, go ahead.
Pluto also has a polarity point. We work with the law of polarity, which is a Hermetic principle. So if Pluto's in the first house, we know that the soul's lessons are about self-actualization, about creating themselves in the world on some level. Actually, Pluto in the first house is a soul who's actually beginning a whole new cycle of lessons, or in a whole new cycle of lessons. It doesn't mean this is the first lifetime, but the cycle of lessons is a new cycle. They finished what was behind them, and they're embarking on a new cycle. They would have the Pluto polarity point then in their 7th house. So it's about integrating themselves with others and learning about themselves through relationships, through the mirror of other people, which somebody with Pluto in the first house probably doesn't see that well, because they're so focused on their own growth and their own, asserting themselves and actualizing themselves in the world. Does that kind of make sense? Okay.
Yeah, I love that. So it's like the house is like where the it sounds like a lot of activity is there, or there's an emphasis there for growth.
Yes.
Right.
In evolutionary astrology, Michelle, we consider the planet and the sign and the house to be the same archetype. So someone may not have, the moon in Cancer, but the moon's in their fourth house. It's going to work in much the same way.
Okay. Definitely agree with that. Yeah, the coloring, it colors it.
Right. Right.
So people really, so it sounds like by looking at where Pluto is, what house, to really expect not just experiences there, but lessons, learnings there.
Exactly. Yes. That's where the lessons are going to come from.
Mm-hmm.
But again, we can never isolate a single thing in the chart. We're holograms. We're multidimensional. So, two babies born side by side in the hospital minutes apart have totally different life paths. Okay, and this doesn't negate astrology, but there's a reason for this. Because there's another dimension to us. The chart itself is a flat two-dimensional representation. So, flat thing with just some glyphs on it. That's a horizontal axis. It has a vertical axis that's brought to it, and that's the consciousness of the person who the chart is for.
Absolutely. Yeah. Good point. So with Pluto, like you said, there's the take that Hermetic principle of polarity. You're saying like what first house, or let's say 11th house, 5th house, whatever, but the activity would be in both, or emphasis would be in both houses. Would there be learnings in both houses, like as well, like groups? I don't know if 11th and 5th, if that would be something with learning lessons about groups and maybe their own creativity.
Yes.
It sounds like it's a great way to pinpoint.
Yes. It's a gateway, but again, we have to remember that we have activity in all through our chart, even houses that don't have a planet in them. We all have relationships, we all have a job, etc. But the Pluto placement, where Pluto is going to reveal where our challenges are and where the limitations exist that we have to overcome.
Love that. Yeah. And, okay, now we've got a couple questions come in. Oh, by the way, anybody, if you would like to ask Daniel a question, you can call in at 347-539-5122. Okay, forward, because I'm looking at the email. Is it possible to go through the houses? Can you touch on the houses with Pluto in each house? That doesn't take too long, a sentence or two?
Well, yeah, I can, but it's going to eat up our time. But yes, we can.
Or where is it? Is there another place on your? Is there a website? Okay, do you have this on your website or book? Where can I find out more information?
I have a lot of information on my website. I don't have an article particularly about Pluto in each of the houses, but Jeffrey Wolf Green, his seminal work was Pluto Volume 1, The Journey of the Soul, and that's what the book is about.
Yeah, I have that book.
It explains how the Pluto archetype is expressed through each house and sign. I would direct the listener to Jeff's original work.
Okay, great. And that's Jeff Green. Yeah, I actually have that book. Great book.
Pluto Volume 1.
Pluto in the Houses.
Pluto Volume 1. Pluto Volume 1.
Okay, perfect. Put that in the chat. Okay. All right. So that is that.
So the second part of the gateway has two parts to it. The second entry point are the lunar nodes, especially the south node. From lifetime to lifetime, we pick up where we left off. And for good reason, we're denied the memory of the traumas and the triumphs that we've had before. So in each lifetime, the soul creates an egocentric structure, which is our moon. And the moon has a past and a future. The south node is the composite of all the previous lunar experiences prior to this lifetime. So that's why it's our habitual, safe place to land, because it's what we're most familiar with, for better or for worse. The North Node is that probable self that we have put out there. It's actually I call it a magical moving sidewalk. It's if we approach it, we take one step towards it. It takes two steps towards us. But we have to choose it. It doesn't happen. The South Node is by default who we are. The North Node is who we're intending to become, but we have to work at it.
We have to work at that. Okay, so it shows. I love the idea too that you say it's a gateway. So it's a way to get in there. Now we did have a question. Now, in evolutionary astrology, do you look at what's happening collectively as well?
You mean mundane astrology? I do, yeah.
Collective. No. Okay, so because it's a divine mystic saying what pseudo aspects of. Well, but what is happening collectively, on a societal level or, a world level,
yes.
the aspects.
Oh, sure.
Okay, so that is what
sure, right. Sure.
Yeah, so you do. Okay.
Yeah, but this is not, it's not a life path. If somebody calls me for a reading, but it's about their life path. But I also blog, frequently, all through the year, every month. With the new moons, the full moons, the eclipses, planets changing signs, etc. So, but that's a different kind of astrology. That's mundane astrology. That's what's happening in the world.
Mm-hmm. Right. So more the mundane. But your readings, do you touch on that, or your readings are more the evolutionary astrology of what the person is coming here to do on a soul level and where they're, how they're evolving?
First, we have to establish an understanding of the chart itself, the birth chart, and then we look at how that chart has unfolded through progressions and then current real-time transits, how they're being affected by it. Yes.
Amazing. Let me ask you, do you see changes now, as you're reading people's charts as to what they're actually focused on or working on as we have evolved, not just individually, but collectively?
Yes. Yes, the world is changing. Yeah. I mean, first we have, kind of establish a baseline, Michelle, because, there's, a certain I guess, segment of the population who are going to come for a reading in the first place. They have to be open. They have to be open to working on themselves. They have to be open to the idea that Mars is not just a space rock. That it actually has its own energetic signature, and not everybody gets that. So I'm not seeing a cross section of humanity. I'm seeing a cross section of people who are on heading towards a spiritual path. If they're not already on a spiritual path, they're individuating from our society and not buying into the consensus reality. But I definitely do see a shift in people. But what mostly I see is people are coming dealing with all the traumas that the world in general is also experiencing. We're seeing it on a collective level and we're seeing it on a personal individual level. It's the same energy. So they come to learn how they can empower themselves, how they can be empowered to work with how this energy is challenging them and generating their own evolutionary growth.
So we have a couple questions in the chat from Angie and Skylove76. Let's see. What does the rising represent in someone's chart versus the sun and moon?
I'm sorry. Would you say? I missed the first part of that.
Okay. What does the rising in someone's chart mean versus the sun and the moon?
That's a great question.
Right. Yeah.
That's a great question. Our rising sign, as I said before, the first house is Aries house. It's always going to be Mars and Aries that has an energy in that house, regardless of the sign that's on the cusp or the planets that are there. And Mars is our instinct. It's our core instinct. It's birth. We come into the world head first without even knowing if somebody's going to be there to catch us before we hit the floor. That's what happens in the first house. It's what we express instinctively. Traditional astrology says that that's what we project. It's not a projection at all. There's no forethought. There's no analysis. It's just pure instinct. So that first house is our instinctual self. It's who we are without being conditioned by anything. Okay. Sun and moon. The moon. I described. The moon is our ego. The moon, and ego is not a bad word. If we didn't have an ego, we wouldn't be able to say our own name. The ego is our emotional guidance system that we have evolved, that we have built through all of our history, all of our memories, and it's our core emotional self. It's our self-image. It's how we see ourselves, and it's where we find it's our security. The sun is the focus of all of the energies in the chart. It's how all the energies are funneled out into the world. It's how they're extruded. It's an extrusion process, if you would. And when I do a reading, I do the sun last. We look at all the other planets. Look at Mercury, Mars. Look at the outer planets, because that whole composite of energies is then focused through the sun sign.
So it's the focuser or main kind of filter. It's the focal point. And it's interesting. So you're saying the moon. Well, the moon, our emotional part.
Yes.
Did you say
yes.
That
all the water signs are emotions. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
The moon's our emotional inner guidance system. It's do we feel safe? Do we feel loved? Or are we afraid, etc.? That's our moon. The
moon is the ego. That's interesting.
It's actually our most conscious point, Michele. It's our moment-to-moment interaction in the world through our emotions.
Oh, that's a great way of looking at that, Daniel. Yeah. Because we are emotional beings, and I think that's something that people need to kind of get comfortable with, especially in the kind of sometimes new age or spiritual communities. People want to poo-poo the emotions. We are here to express emotionally. I mean, that's that energy and motion. That's interesting how you say so. That's minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day, that emotional state. That's how we are connecting with the world, is what I'm hearing you say.
Exactly. That's exactly right. We respond emotionally. Yes, we have an intellect. We think about it. But even when we have a thought, we have an emotional reaction to that thought.
Yeah, an emotional reaction to that thought. So that's what's, okay, it's clarifying, so I love you. Wonderful explanation. Thank you. And then the rising, how do you say it's our instinct?
Yes, it's our conditioning. It's our instinct. Yes.
Okay. So, but isn't the emotion, how we're reacting or responding emotionally, would that be instinctual as well? Maybe to change a word.
Well, it's instinct in the sense that it's our habit pattern. It's how we have trained ourselves to respond, because Elizabeth Kubler-Ross said it. We are emotional beings, and there are two emotions. There's love and fear, but our core emotion is love. But love generally isn't what gets expressed, because through our history, our personal history, lifetime after lifetime, we've expressed that love and we've been hurt. So there's a general atmosphere of being afraid of love, because that's an open door to getting hurt. So this is the balance that we all carry within us.
And what can the Evolutionary Astrology point out? And by the way, let's get your email. It's 4, evolutionaryastrology.com. So those that are listening, it's in the chat. But those of you who are listening and would like to check out Daniel's website, maybe even get an astrology reading. I love looking at soul-centered astrology. I love looking from a soul level. So But what can people do to move? Because it's interesting you say that polarity within, there's the fear of love, fear of being loved because there's been so much hurt. We had a caller speak of that actually today that called in. What do you find helps with that saying that polarity that we all carry within us?
I think it's about perspective, and it's about understanding that this is not the first time we're going around this, this wheel of fortune. We don't die. We can't die. We don't die. We are immutable beings. We're souls. We're not egos. We're not persons. We're souls. And you can't kill me. You can say things that hurt me, but I'm going to come back again. I mean, we're looking at a surface expression, and I know that it's easy to talk about this, but when we recognize, somebody comes for a reading and they've had a really, really abusive childhood, and they've come into their adulthood and they don't understand it. They blame their father or their stepfather or their brother or their uncle. It's rampant throughout history. And when they come to the realization that was just their father's stuff, it wasn't about them. They weren't a bad person. It didn't happen to them because they were bad. Karma is not retribution. Karma is just energy that needs to be balanced, find its lowest center of gravity. And when they understand that whoever it was that was the source of the abuse was just acting out their own stuff, and maybe the two of them had a connection. Obviously, I believe the two of them had a connection prior to this lifetime. But the point being is that it wasn't about them. It happened to them, but it wasn't about them. And when they can understand that and begin to forgive themselves for hating themselves because it happened, then they begin to heal it.
Yeah, I love that too. I just put in the chat, we're not persons, we're souls. So getting that soul perspective, and that everything that is acted out is in for a form of healing. And as you're saying, balanced energy, that sounds nice. Yeah. I never liked that idea of the retribution. It's just, and so many people misuse the term karma, saying, well, I was poor last lifetime, so now I have money. Or I had money and I misused it, so now I'm poor. I mean, it's like this kind of, or they I did something to them and that's why they're doing that to me. This kind of,
I wish it was that simple. I wish it was that simple.
Yeah. Exactly. It's not a simple concept. Yeah, it's not a simple.
Right. It's right. It's complicated. And the other part of this, Michelle, the other part of this, which really, kind of spreads it out, is that I don't believe that that time is linear. I believe that there's an eternal now. We have to, somebody once asked God, why did you create time? And he or she answered, so that everything wouldn't happen all at once. But, maybe that's not the way it really is.
Yeah. So we have a question, but Fountainhead, if you could make it a little more clear, because you in the chat, just can you talk about 2007 and Pluto? It may be too late. So if you could, unless you understand that.
2007? So I'd have to go back and look at 2007. I can't keep it all in my head.
There was a celestial event in 2007, 2008.
Well,
2008. Yes. 2008. Okay,
2008. Pluto. Okay. 2008. Pluto entered the sign of Capricorn, and Capricorn is Saturn's sign. Capricorn creates structure. Capricorn is called the Lord of Karma, not coincidentally, but Saturn is it really gets a bad rep. I mean, Saturn creates skills and masteries. Saturn is what it's time and space. It's gravity. So it can be hard because Saturn wants to create structure out of things. Well, when Pluto entered Capricorn, that was when the stock market tumbled. All of the foundations, Saturn and Capricorn are foundations, are things that are too big to fail. all of the things that we take for granted, the ground that we stand on shaking beneath our feet. Well, that's because we're moving through this threshold, this liminal space, where we're moving into a new paradigm. And so things have to be shaken up. Saturn is solid, it's crystallized. It's just so set in stone, literally, that it needs to be shattered before a new form can take shape. And that's what Pluto has been doing. The big event that's occurred with Pluto in Capricorn has been the 7, and actually we had an 8th square just this week of Uranus to Pluto since 2012. Seven squares. That's an epic event. 7 in 3 years.
That is.
And if we look around, if we look around in the world, we can see the effects of it. I mean, everything around us seems to be up in the air. Everything is confused. The economy, the politics, the food, the water, the migrations of people, ethnic diversity, all of it. It's all being shaken up like a great big milkshake.
And the shaking up, is that to free the structure, the foundation, so that new ones can be built, and even, more importantly, people want to build new ones, as it's crumbling.
Right.
Dismantling.
Right.
When you look, Daniel, from an evolutionary standpoint, from the astrological standpoint, what do you see is being built or created or the next step in evolution?
Well, certainly we all are aware of what's wrong in the world. And we all envision that all of the problems that in the world that we see around us, whether it's war or famine, disease, misogyny, gender inequality, racial inequality, all of these things that we know we can have a better world. This is what we all want. I believe that we're on the threshold of a golden age, Michelle. I don't know that it's going to happen in 2016 or 2017. We may have to go through some narrows. There are a lot of things that need to be shaken up and changed before this golden age can occur. And maybe it'll be that our grandchildren will see it. Maybe we're just sowing those seeds. We're dealing with human consciousness, so we're looking at collective intention and how long it takes everybody or enough people to realize which way we need to go. A lot of people want change, but the change that some people want is for things to go back the way that they used to be.
Yeah.
So there's there's different momentums. But I love the Arundhati Roy, the Indian writer. She says, a new world is not only possible; she's on her way. On a quiet day, I can hear her breathing. I love that quote because. Because if we look, there's glimpses of light that are coming through the darkness, and we just have to give it time to develop. We have to give enough people. Maybe it's the 100 monkey thing. It's hard to say. There's a law of saturation. It's human nature not to want to change because what we know is familiar. We hold on to a job or we'll hold on to a relationship even when we know it doesn't work, because what's out there is scary. But when the pain becomes greater than the fear, we change.
When the pain becomes greater. Yeah, and you can see that individually and collectively,
Right.
Yeah. Right. What do you see, we just someone in the chat asking, when Pluto, so it's in Capricorn, there's a lot of this dismantling, this destruction, but as it goes into Aquarius, and or it could also correspond to someone's 11th house. What do you see? When is it? When is it in Aquarius? We've got quite a few years before it moves in.
Yeah, I can progress it for you, but again, it's too far out in the future to really make the any predictions, and I don't like to do that anyway. But I can give you a flavor of the archetypes.
Okay, that would be great.
Okay, so before we get to Aquarius, we have to move through Capricorn. The chart of the United States in 1776 has Pluto at 26 degrees of Capricorn. In 2020, Pluto is going to conjunct the United States of Pluto. It's never happened before because none of us have been alive 250 years to have experienced it. So this is a major event that's coming. At the same time, Saturn and Jupiter are going to conjunct in the sign of Aquarius, and Pluto will be at the final degrees of Capricorn, and there will be a stellium, Saturn, Jupiter in Aquarius conjunct Pluto or Capricorn, also in 2020. In 2023, Pluto will also move into Aquarius. Aquarius was discovered, Aquarius is ruled by Uranus. And Uranus was discovered in 1781 at the time of the American and French Revolutions. Up until that time, for 4,000 years, Saturn was believed to be the outermost planet in the solar system. It has rings around it. It's associated with limitations. Well, Uranus was discovered, and not only did they discover that it had rings, but that it rotates on its side perpendicular to the ecliptic. It's like rolling on its side. It's when you look at it, you don't see the edge of its rings. You see the rings full face. So it's associated with unconventionality, a revolution. Clearly, the time it was found, and it's the planet of revolution. The question is what kind of revolution will it be? It's about liberation. It will bring about a tremendous force and compel a liberation of all things. But will that liberation come gracefully and peacefully, or will it come violently? And there's two schools of thought on it, and only time will tell.
Yeah, only time will tell. But it sounds like, too, with what's the aspects that are happening now with Pluto and Uranus, is the resistance is getting, dismantled or broken up. And like you mentioned earlier, it takes a lot for people to change. It just doesn't happen. Change. We want change, but we also want things to stay the same because it's, what's that saying? The devil, that the devil is right. Yeah.
If we want to understand the future, we have to understand the past, because the past is what becomes the present, and it's the natural tendency of the past to be repeated, to be projected out into the future, but it doesn't have to. But I study the past. In order to understand how planets are going to interact with each other, I look to the past to see what they did in the past, through observation and correlation. It's not about assigning something to a planet and saying this is what it is, because we don't know that that's what it is. It's got a broad range of expression. The Pisces in somebody's chart could be someone who's visionary, has ecstatic visions. They could be a poet. They could be an artist, or it could be somebody who's mentally ill or is alcoholic. And the chart doesn't tell you that, Michelle. The chart does not tell you that until the person who is the chart sits down in front of me and I ask them a few questions. Do I begin to understand how those archetypes are working?
Right.
So it's a wide spectrum. Red is red pink, or is red nearly purple, or it's a wide range of a wide spectrum of expression. There's no one way.
No, and like what you said earlier, the person bringing their consciousness,
exactly.
As well.
Exactly.
That is huge. Well, we're winding out of time. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
The other part.
I don't mean to interrupt you. Just briefly, there's another very large component of evolutionary astrology, and that is what Jeff Green called the stages of evolution, stages of consciousness. When we first come into the world, when we're first incarnate, we want to be like everybody else. Our security, the soul is security based. Our mother's womb is the safest place in the universe for us to land. So we're all seeking security on some level, in some fashion. And when we're new souls, when we're young souls, that security is to be like everybody else. We want to play the game. We want to learn how to play the game because it's a herd mentality. 70% of the people on the planet are in a herd mentality. It's why the world is the way that it is. As we move through that consensus state, and each of these stages has 3 different states in it, at the upper level of consensus state are the people running the world. They have figured out the rules. They're making the rules. The bankers, the kings, the popes, all of them. They're the ones in charge. But when we move all the way through that, and we all have, we say, isn't there something more? This can't be all that there is? And we begin to understand that we're not like everybody else. That we embrace our diversity. And we begin to individuate. It's a Jungian principle, and it's about 20% of the people on the planet. We rebel. It's a Uranian archetype, and we rebel against that consensus. We rebel against the conformity, and we begin to create and individualize, new ideas. And eventually, we understand that there's natural law, and that opposes man-made law, and we begin to what Jeff called spiritualize. It has nothing to do with religion. It's recognizing that we're all connected, that we are the wave of the ocean, and that we're all in this together. There's only one of us on the planet. And when we begin to come to that becomes a consensus, then we will begin to move into that golden age again. And we've been there before, and we will be there again.
Wow. We will be there again. Oh, wow. Daniel, it's amazing. You've been a wealth of wisdom and information. It's just been a wonderfully awakening conversation with you. Those of you that are listening, our guest has been Daniel Fiverson, and you can find out more information about his work. He's got blogs as well, some articles, and if you would also even like a reading with him to get your chart done, you can go to 4evolutionaryastrology.com, and that's the number 4, evolutionaryastrology.com. Wonderful, wonderful insights. Thanks so much, Daniel, for being on Awakenings.
Michele, thank you. Blessings and prayers for peace.
Oh, thank you. Blessings to you. All right. Blessings to you, everyone. Thank you. We have some new listeners that were in the chat and saying that the chat was so wonderful. We have a wonderfully warm, loving, enlightened people, wealths of information as well. So thank you for that, for noticing that. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. Really, this has been a wonderful, wonderful program today. I've really enjoyed calling all the calls and everybody in the chat just interacting. And, those of you that are listening later by the archive, we're with you. You're with us, too. So hope you can feel that warm, loving energy. Again, our guest was Daniel Fiverson. You can find out more information about him as well as if you feel inclined to do some reading. It sounds like I love evolutionary astrology. I love anything soul-centered. And you can find out a lot about yourself through it. Of course, he talked about some books by Jeff Green, and the Pluto Volume 1 is really good, and also the Stages of Evolution that Daniel touched on. Again, Daniel Fiverson's website, 4evolutionaryastrology.com, and that's the number 4, evolutionaryastrology.com. Thank you, everyone, for being here. You guys are such love. Thanks for making my Wednesday extra special. We're here every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Pacific time, where I will do readings at the first half of the program, or dream interpretation, all things soul, all things spiritual, metaphysical. We dive in to that, and you can do that just by calling in, or you can even ask questions in the chat. We do it as well. Some people email. All is good here. If you'd like more information about me, you can go to soulentrpreneurship.com, selfandlight.com, or you can go to Soul Insights for Spirit-Led Living.com, and that's Soul Insights, the number 4, spiritledliving.com. There's also what my Navigating Your Greatest Soul Shift, the Daily Om course. So there's a lot of support. Join me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Join our Awakenings community on Facebook as well. So there's a lot of support, a lot of connecting. And like I said, we've got a great chat room, also known as the Sacred Space of Empowerment Room. And you can see why. It's really, we've got great people in there. So anyway, you guys enjoy your day, enjoy the rest of the weekend, and I'll see you here next Wednesday. All righty?
Awakenings broadcasts every Wednesday, 12 p.m. Pacific Time. Archive shows are available on iTunes. For continued Awaken conversation and insights, join the Awakenings group on Facebook and visit Michelle's blog at soulinsightsforspiritledliving.com. That's soulinsights, the number 4, spiritledliving.com. Keep awake.